Welcome, everyone, to the Ohio Fly Tying Guild. I'm Gary Begley. Thanks for joining us. Now, the Guild is a function of the Buckeye United Fly Fishers, my local club, Cincinnati area, and it's in conjunction with the Ohio Council of Fly Fishers International. Now, that said, I'm going to get right into the program. What I have planned a couple flies tying utilizing foam, 2 millimeter foam. Fly shops sell it. Any of the craft stores sell it. Walmart sells it. It's very popular stuff used for all kinds of different crafts and stuff, and makes some darn effective flies. I'm going to show you two of them tonight. Again, if anyone has a question or a comment as I'm tying, just go ahead and speak up. It's not going to bother me at all. First fly is a Gartside Gurgler. It's a Jack Gartside pattern. Great. I've fished for smallmouth bass and done well. It's good for freshwater and saltwater. Actually, Jack came up with it while he was fishing in the Bahamas, and he tweaked it quite a few different times, apparently, according to his book, to get to this version. And what we've got is some bucktail back here for the tail with some flash in there. And as you can see, we've got a really large hackle, which is going to create a lot of movement. And I really like this. This is a different hook than Jack uses, but I like this one because of the extra wide gape. Now, I do tie this lip up front just a little bit differently. I double it over. Jack doesn't do that. He leaves it out straight, and he can trim it into a circle, well, a curve out front, or leaves it as a square or a triangle, just to get different movements, different actions in the water. But I've settled on this method where I fold it back over. This makes this much sturdier, this bill up front, and it moves a lot of water, creates a lot of disturbance. So I'm going to get a fresh hooked in the vise. Now we'll get started. And this hook, by the way, is a B10S Gamakatsu, size 2. One other thing I wanted to mention. There's two potential issues when we tie with foam. We get a body tied on, and we go pull real tight on the thread, just like having to develop a feel for when the thread's going to break. You have to develop a feel for when the thread might cut right through the foam. Again, it's only 2 millimeters thick and it's real soft. So that is one thing to be concerned about. And the other one is foam bodied flies, while very effective, it's very possible and they're very apt to body spinning around on the hook. I'll show you a couple different ways besides super glue that we can combat that. And first off, we need to get a good thread base, tight wraps. I'm going to come back to just a point in between the hook barb and the hook point. That's where I'm going to start off with my tail. And like I mentioned, the tail is bucktail. I didn't mention the various colors. You can tie these in any color you wish. I've got a bucktail. I'm going to get a sparse amount from about in the center. I've got some that are real long. I'm going to hold this about in the middle. There's always some shorter ones in there, some that come loose. So start with a sparse bunch, knowing good and well I'm going to be pulling some out. Some of them don't look right, get all curly. I get rid of those. All right, this tail should be about entire hook length. Lay this 45-degree angle down on the side. Let thread torque pull it up on top. And again, I'm going to use tight. wraps. Keeping this on top of the hook shank. I'm going to wrap this all the way up to about a hook eye width behind the eye. Like I said, the foam is very slippery. If we just tied it on just a thread base, it's definitely going to, the body's definitely going to slide around. This is going to be one method. I'm going to be tying it onto this, and it's good and tight. And this doesn't want to spin. Going to be in good shape with that. Now I'm going to come back about halfway point or so. And I've got some pearl crystal flash. Pull out about 3 strands. Just a touch of flash back at the tail. Depending on where you're fishing and the species, sometimes fish don't like any flash whatsoever. Other times they are attracted by some. You just got to kind of get used to the waters that you're tying, that you're fishing. I'm going to wrap this around, right about in the center. Wrap it around the bobbin tube. Pull this up on top. Wind this down back to the tie-in point, original tie-in point. Yeah, get these cut just a little bit longer. I like to keep these different lengths. And most of them just a little bit longer than the tail material. Okay, right up to the front. A piece of foam. Got a piece, I think it's 3/8 wide and long enough. I think it was 3 inches wide or 3 inches long, as I've measured for this size hook. I'm going to get it started up at the front by the hook eye. Just knock these 2 corners off. Now, in conjunction with that, tied in real tight as far as the thread base, I'm going to, and tie in the tail material. I'm actually pushing this around. I'm letting it surround the hook shank as best I can. These are very tight wraps. There you go, one more. Now, we tie in our hackle. This is this. Much larger hackle than we're used to working with, most likely. I'm going to tie it in by the tip, and I'm going to tie it in with the shiny side up. Again, good and tight wraps. Back up to the front. And this body is tied on fairly securely. I'm not going to worry about that starting to spin as I'm fishing at all. I'm going to wrap this hackle, cross over to the next section. I'm going to let these go down into the little V section that I created by the tight wraps of thread. Get this tied off. So top. Get these barbs down the best I can. With a lot of barbs down there to create some movement in the water. straight across. Now, this is where Mr. Gartside will finish here, and let's leave this alone. We'll trim it. It can be cut straight across. You could cut a curve into it, cut it for the triangle, just for different, like I mentioned before, different actions in the water. What I like to do, because when I fish it, this keeps, well, it's going to be much shorter, but it always keeps flopping over this way, and I don't really get the type of action I want. I like to bend this over, create a little gap in there, and tie this down like so. And finish, and then I'll trim the rest of that lip off. What I like to do is usually use this in general, measure this head section, I'll call it. And that's about where I want to cut this lip material off. So that's the way I like to tie it. That is a completed Gartside Gurgler. Any questions? Any comments?
Was that foam like the width of the hook gap?
Let me see. Let me check that. That's not what I started off with as a guide, but yes, it is exactly the hook gap, which is a good rule of thumb for most patterns that I've tied anyway. Kind of an ugly looking fly, but boy, it's effective. Anybody ever fished a gurgler?
Similar, yeah.
Something similar, yeah. There's a few patterns that are similar to this. All very good flies as far as I'm concerned.
Does it gurgle when you run it through the water?
It can, depending on how you fish it, it can make a gurgling sound. Yeah, it does move a lot. Just stripping it in softly, it creates a lot of a really nice V pattern in the water. And if you pull the way I do the lip, if you strip real hard, it kind of goes down in just slightly and pushes up against the water. It makes a real big disturbance. All right. Second pattern. Like I mentioned earlier, this session might go fairly quickly. Zoom in a little bit. This is a beetle, just a little generic beetle pattern. Got foam. This is Swiss straw on this outer shell. Underneath there's a piece of foam. These little legs, I'll refer to them as the underbody, or ostrich herl. And that concludes the list of materials. I'll get a fresh hook in here. And the hook that I'm using, if you guys have looked at the material list that I sent out, it says a TMC, as far as the hook, it says TMC 00. And then the size, it's located here. Yeah, size 12, which is what I'm tying on. It's not a 00. I just neglected to put the 1 in. It's a TMC 100. Might have to have a talk with the with my proofreader. That's me. Okay. TMC 100, just standard dry fly hook. Could be any brand. And we just want it to be a light wire so it'll float pretty well. And the first thing we want to tie in is this Swiss straw. Now, in case you're not familiar with Swiss straw, it comes, the only way I've seen it, in fact, is on a card. And I got a piece of it up here. Yeah. What I do with this is straighten this out. It's all folded together. I like to straighten it out. Cut it to the proper width for the fly that I'm going to be tying. And I double it. So it'll be double thickness. Because this stuff is somewhat fragile. And every time I tie this, I get asked, isn't that shelf fragile? Yes, it is. But if you're afraid of that, I've fished a lot and not really had any problems with the shell coming off. But as far as I'm concerned, the answer is some UV resin on top, which I've tied a few with it. You can see how much, maybe you can see how much shinier that is. Kind of glares. And that makes it hard as a shell, frankly. So I'm going to use black threads, 70 denier. And I'm going to do something a little differently. I'm going to start this instead of running a thread base and then turn around and coming right back. I'm just going to start back at the rear. Another thread base. Be on the way forward. Stay back just a little bit. Here's my piece that I've sized by cutting it. And I'm just going to double that. Fold it in half lengthwise. And I'm going to cut just the corners off.
Gary, when you double that, is it about the size of the gap?
I
Gape?
think it's going to be larger. Yeah, it's going to be larger than the hook gap size. What the trick is there, it needs to be wide enough to cover the piece of foam. So we've got the foam is right about. I didn't start out with this being hook gap size either, but that's pretty darn close. It just needs to cover over top of the foam. So this is actually a little bit wider because we're going to be dragging it over. It needs to go down on the sides just a little bit. In my thread, so it'll jump to the rear, roll right off my thumbnail. Actually, that got back a little further than I wanted to. Try that again. There we go. Try to keep this flat. I pull the sides inward to the hook as opposed to curling up. All right. Put my thread back up front and get my piece of foam. Which I've sized. Now this is the other way that we can attempt to keep the body from spinning once we get it tied. Like using what I call a binder strip. I'm just going to find this down to the hook. With several wraps of thread, I'm going to go up on and come back down. It's going to destroy all the floatability of this section. But this gives the foam, when I pull it over, gives it a good solid base so it doesn't want to spin. Does a surprising job. I use this on a lot of the hopper patterns that I tie with foam. The hoppers generally have fairly big body, a lot of materials. We gotta do something to keep them from spinning. Outer shell, and I got the body material. What I need to do now is get the ostrich herl. Got one of these guys. You gotta look close when you. It needs to be fairly long, and at least this particular feather. Some of these. Here's a nice long one, and the one right next to it is only that long. So you got to take care whenever you're choosing this, but you get a good long one, so you'll have enough to cover all the way up to the front of the hook. Just going to tie this in, bring my thread forward. Now I'm going to use a bobbin cradle. Rotary function. And yes, I do know I should be using hackle pliers, but I think I can get this done without it. This last turn is going to go in front of the thread. That way all I have to do is come up. That ties it off. Let's take a couple reps behind. And one in front. Put this out of the way. Put that off. So there's underbody and the legs. I'll refer to them as. And pretty much in the same fashion as the Gartside Gurgler, tie this foam down. I don't double back on it. And here's the deal. This is something I should have put a brown marker as an option to use with this fly. There's inevitably always a section that doesn't get covered. I don't want to cut this stuff wider because it's just going to come down and block off the view of those little legs. Now, what I do, my scissors come up against the hook eye, get rid of that. And this is not necessary, but I like to trim this corner just a bit, that corner just a bit. All right. Quick finish. And I'll get my Sharpie marker out. And make it look a little better. Will it make it fish any better? I'm not really sure. Look better does. Actually, this, got to remember what's the fish see. This. So some of this stuff is for the fly fisher. So there is just a generic little beetle. And like I mentioned, this Swiss straw is fairly fragile, although I've fished them with bluegill all day and not had the Swiss straw get broke. So there we go. Now the fragile Swiss straw is, I'll use the term bulletproof. Not actually the case, but all right. So there is a beetle pattern.
What colors do you tie it in, Gary?
This is the colors that I see the beetles in my area on. You can tie them in any color. Google and see what different colors beetles are. There's some are green, some are lighter brown, some are more of a white. But this is my favorite pattern my favorite color to tie it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Swiss straw, unless if you're not familiar with it, it does come in a variety of colors. And the foam, of course, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there other uses for that Swiss straw?
Well, no doubt there are. I've only used it myself for like a shell on a
I mean,
fly.
I was just thinking when you first tied it on there, when it was just hanging off the back, it almost looked like a wing.
I'm sure you could probably utilize it as a wing in some fashion. Yeah. Yeah.
What sizes do you tie it in, Gary?
What size? This one I tied this matches the size of the beetles
Mm-hmm.
that are in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's size 12, and that's what I tie it with. And you could, and of course, depending on the beetles in your area, you could make it larger or smaller. Any of you fished any foam patterns?
Yes,
Sure.
I was going to say, if you don't, you need to tie some,
yeah.
either some hoppers or some beetles or something of that nature, because they can be really, really effective.
Heck, I used to take the edge of that foam and take a razor blade and cut just a sliver off of it, long enough to wrap the body and do it for a dry fly. Makes nice looking little dry flies, and you throw rocks at them and not sink.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
That's a good idea.
one of the things that you did that I do sometimes when I got the foam, I take a marker and put a contrasting color down the edge before I cut that sliver off. So when you wrap the body on the dry fly on the hook, then you see like a segmentation.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's good.
As far as the Swiss straw, I use that like what you just did. I just use it for covering the back, the shells and stuff. But I've never had any trouble fishing it and fish destroying it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I got old Swiss straw. I don't know if you got the new stuff or what.
No, it's the old stuff.
Oh, okay.
Mine's several years old. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They
Do you
had
find that the foam that you get in a hobby shop or is similar to is pretty much the same as you buy it anywhere else?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it's the same stuff. Fly shops sell 'em, Walmart, any of the hobby shops, and
Mm-hmm.
I've purchased from all the above, and it's the same stuff. In my opinion, what I see.
Yeah, something else you could do. You could buy little die cutters, and you got the foam. Take a hammer, and you could knock out little beetle bodies. All you have to do is tie them on the hook.
Yep,
Different shapes, different sizes.
yep. And
Gary, this is a little different subject, but
that's fine.
there's a lot of I read a lot about open cell versus closed cell foam. And Rainey's, I think, used to sell, or probably still sells a different kind of a foam than I get in the hobby shop. It's just different. I don't know which is which. Can you help with that?
Um, this, what I use tonight is closed cell.
I'm
The
sorry.
open, this is closed cell. What I use tonight,
Yes.
this would be closed cell foam. The other, I don't know for a fact, but I would think some of them, this looks, if you look at this, it looks solid. Looks like a solid sheet. Some of the open cell foam, I think, is the ones that are more porous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yes.
Is that what they refer to as open cell? Is the more porous, the
Yeah.
Yeah.
stuff that, okay.
Yep. And this is,
Yeah.
like I said, this is the closed cell.
And they both float. So,
Yeah.
Well, what's the difference between the two? Why would I use one or the other?
well, my opinion, the open cell, the way I use it, like on the dry flies, when you cut off a sliver and being porous, you could wrap it around the hook a little bit easier than if you got the closed cell and try to do the same thing because it's a little more dense.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're bringing up the subject of wrapping foam around the hook for a body, they sell what they call micro foam, which is 1 millimeter thick as opposed to 2. And it's that way it's a lot thinner, and you cut just a
Yeah.
piece off of it and wrap it just for a different effect.
So all those very thin foams are all closed cell, and it's 3 millimeter. I can't recall the various sizes, but
Yeah, you can get. I've seen this is 2 millimeters the most common. I've seen
yeah.
it in 3 millimeter. I've seen it in 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's more sizes available. Thanks for showing up, and hopefully we'll see you again next month.